Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. We're continuing with our survey of the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're now on 7th canto chapter 4. Hiranyakashipu terrorizes the universe. And this, the name of this chapter gives an indication of what can happen here in the world. We can't assume that the status quo will maintain. Whatever we accumulate here and whatever situation we may develop is temporary. In fact, the very platform on which we're able to perceive the world and move through it is extremely tenuous. The physical body that we inhabit right now is a biological machine that has a lot of moving parts that wear out in time and can be easily jarred, and so that they don't work properly at any time. So we can't assume that we have a long time and that we'll stay in the same situation. I mention this because there's a way in which the material mindset assumes that I'll be able to stay in the material world. In fact, this is something that was noted by Yudhishthira. It's mentioned in the Mahabharata how when he was queried by Yamaraj, who asked what is the most amazing thing in this world, he said that it's the mentality of the living entities who think that I'll live forever, even though they see everyone's dying around them. So we could take a clue from this chapter that Hiranyakashipu terrorizes the universe, that there are a mixture of different kinds of living entities in the material world. And you can't guarantee that you'll keep them out of your space. They'll come in one way or the other. So don't think that you can find a pristine environment and you'll be able to protect it no matter where you go in the material world. So Hiranyakashipu had performed austerities and to get what he wanted. And he, for the benefit of all of us as a teaching method about what not to do, showed us the result of unabashed request for complete material happiness and unlimited opulence and power. So I might want a little bit of opulence and power compared to him, but one could categorically see after Hiranyakashipu's life and what he got and what was taken from him and the contrast between he and his son Prahlad and what the result of his life was, that the real goal in life is to ask Krishna for pure devotional service. There's a temptation to ask to be protected, to be able to live long. Of course, all these things are nice to have, but they can't be guaranteed. And one may also want a modicum of material happiness. But why is it that pure devotees don't ask for any of these things? They only ask to be engaged life after life in devotional service. For instance, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that I don't even want liberation, just as long as I'm born in the family of a devotee, even if I'm born as a bug or a worm. If it's in the family of Vaishnavas, then I'm satisfied with that, as long as I have connection to pure devotional service. And in the outset of this chapter, we hear Narada Muni saying, 7.4.1, that Lord Brahma was very much satisfied by Hiranyakashipu's austerities, because there's a system in the universe. If you perform certain kinds of austerities or rituals, there's an expectation that you're going to get a result. And Brahma then noted that what he did was very difficult to perform. So therefore, when solicited for benedictions, he agreed. He indeed granted them, although they were rarely to be achieved. So Hiranyakashipu he worked really hard to get what he wanted. And now he's set up. That is, he can ask a person who can actually give him some significant material happiness and a situation in which he could try to enjoy it. So not everyone gets that, but here we see that Hiranyakashipu is getting it. So in the second verse, we get a lesson from this chapter that we can imbibe and take with us wherever we go. The verse reads, Lord Brahma said, O Hiranyakashipu, these benedictions for which you have asked are difficult to obtain for most men. Nonetheless, O my son, I shall grant you them, although they are generally not available. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Material benedictions are not always exactly worthy of being called benedictions. If one possesses more and more, a benediction itself may become a curse. For just as achieving material opulence in this material world requires great strength and endeavor, maintaining it also requires great endeavor. Lord Brahma informed Hiranyakashipu that although he was ready to offer him whatever he had asked, the result of the benedictions would be very difficult for Hiranyakashipu to maintain. Nonetheless, since Brahma had promised, he wanted to grant all the benedictions asked. The word durlabhan indicates that one should not take benedictions one cannot enjoy peacefully. Now, there's a great lesson in this verse and purport. And the first is that keep in mind, because we're living entities, our actual nature is very subtle. And whatever we take on in the gross material world, we have to maintain. And it requires a kind of exertion that is beyond our comfort zone. That's a general principle. And if you remember the principle, if I remember it, I may not be as eager to take on material benedictions because, as mentioned here, they're hard to maintain. And maintenance is a real pain. People gather in material benedictions, for instance, a home. A home is a nice thing to have. You got to have a place to go home to and call your base, and there you can collect your thoughts and have some private conversations and get yourself together. But the size of the home, the opulence of the home, and so forth, the more you have to maintain in this world. And it's not so easy to maintain. Those who have practiced in some part of their life, usually the early part of their life, the process of brahmacharya, Prabhupada had a brahmacharini ashram also, to live a simple life without any possessions. For instance, a brahmachari would learn to not have anything. And that whatever he gets, he gives to the spiritual master, said, here, it's yours. And that he doesn't even eat unless he's called. If the spiritual master forgets to call him, then he says, okay, I just won't eat because I'm not acting on my own agenda. I don't have anything of myself to maintain. I'm simply serving. And this is a great relief for the soul, actually. And one who's had this experience, cultivated to one degree or another, can see that getting more and more doesn't necessarily mean happiness. This is a cliche to say this, actually. It's written in songs and poems and so forth. But revisiting the principle is important because the materialistic mind thinks, if I only had blank, then I would be happy. But if one considers the fact that these kinds of benedictions, whatever they are, small or large, don't guarantee happiness, and what's more, they're hard to maintain. And then finally, as Srila Prabhupada makes the point, this word durlabhan stands out in this verse, durlabhan. Prabhupada says this means, it indicates that one should not take benedictions that one cannot enjoy peacefully. So if we were to look at the point more and more deeply, we would find from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and the great acharyas that we can't enjoy any material benediction peacefully. If it's something that we're using for Krishna, it's not a material benediction. We may ask for a facility to serve Krishna, but that's not material. But anything that I take for my own purpose becomes a source of distraction for me in my life. This is a basic principle. So coming back to this point in the story of Hiranyakashipu can help us immensely in our sojourn in this life as very subtle living entities from the spiritual world who are working through a set of material senses and interacting with the world. And I'll take a few reflections before I move on to the next lesson and point. Yes, Mukharvin.
Maharaj, I have reflection and question.
Yes.
So reflection is that, how the very nicely Prabhupada pointed how material benediction become actually the more pain, and later the benediction is not such a thing that we should look. And even in corporate world we see that as we grow high in the grades and the responsibility increases and you are more expected to perform in that level. Unless you perform your so it's like one way it's benediction that you go to higher level, but another way is that you have to perform more in that level that is expected from you. And the question I have is that you are mentioning that we should not ask anything that for our personal life, but for service is okay, that increases your service. But then we also see that when we accept Krishna consciousness means that there is no material life, and this is everything is Krishna conscious, whatever we work, whatever we serve. So can you give some examples that we ask for our personal life as a devotee, or distinguishing it for our own and then as for service?
Please give me intelligence so that I can understand how to utilize everything in your service. Please give me association or proximity to devotees wherever I am in the world. Please send me $1 billion so that we can expand our temple and book distribution. At least. And you can ask for things like that, if you so desire, and if you think it's a good idea. The point is to make sure that everything that we're desiring for our service and we're desiring for the mission. Yes, Prabhu.
You asked. Hare Krishna. So you explained that how Yudhishthira Maharaj was astonished that people know that they are going to die, but still they are continuing, they are making plans as if we are going to be here for eternity. We also, as devotees, we also hear this and we understand that we are going to die. It doesn't it doesn't sink in this thought unless and sometimes when we see that someone near and dear one, there is a death, that thought comes for say a day or two or a week, that actually we are here only for a very short time. And then when again we are chanting, but again we are making plans that okay, let me accumulate this much, and then after I have lot of amount, then maybe I'll try to fully serve Krishna or fully be in Krishna consciousness. So why is this happening to us? Why it's only theoretical? Why it's not getting ingrained in us? That we think that we can die tomorrow, and then we should. The most important thing is like Parikshit Maharaj, that we have to just listen. And
you said it yourself. It's ingrained, and it takes a lifetime of practice to actually have full realization. Therefore, we live through the various eras of our life and dedicate ourselves to Krishna consciousness to the best of our ability in each one of those. I can tell you that it becomes more that the teachings that we're here temporarily and that anything can happen become more profound as you get older. When you're 22 years old, the idea of birth, death, old age, and disease sounds almost ludicrous, like it's meant for someone else. because young people are so full of strength and vigor normally that they feel that I will live forever, and what's the big deal about old age, because it's hard to experience for oneself. But Krishna is so merciful that he allows us to go through various kinds of situations, and one will come, if one lives long enough, to a position of having a different perspective. Just the time factor, if you continue in Krishna consciousness throughout your life, which you will to one degree or another, but if you do it to a stronger degree, then you'll be able to compare notes as you get older and start to see that actually, this is really true. These things do happen. And when you find yourself in the situation where your physical body and circumstances are dwindling or quickly going away from you, then you'll know where to take shelter. So keep practicing and endeavoring. It's quite natural for people to be attached, and you can't artificially also pretend to be not attached. But what you can do is go on with your practice of Krishna consciousness, and it is highly effective in that the combination between your practice and realization and the kind of influence that you'll notice from the material energy as you continue will allow you to come to the perfectional stage of life. I examine Prabhupada's life and see that when we met him when I first saw him in 1973 for the first time, he was in the role of a Paramahamsa. If I had seen him when he was 22 years old, I would have seen that he had a family and so forth, and but within that context, he was applying all the principles of Krishna consciousness. He wrote that, it took me 12 years before I could take up the initiation officially. He held it within his heart at that time. His spiritual master immediately told him that you should do this, spread Lord Chaitanya's movement in the West, in English. And he thought, how can I do that? I'm already in this situation. And then when he came to America, he said, just see, I had to come at this old age and broke. He would berate himself for doing that. Of course, it was all Krishna's arrangement. But you could see that there were different phases of his life. He had a business. He expected that the business would do really well. And so did everybody else, because he was fully equipped to make it happen. But as Prabhupada himself says, Krishna dismantled everything. And in the audience, a lot of devotees chuckled, like some of you just did now. Prabhupada said, no, it is not laughing. When Krishna dismantles everything, you become very morose. But, he's talking about this to show that you need practice of Krishna consciousness plus your life's experience. Vidyam chayas tadvedo beyam saha avidyayam ratum tirtva vidyayam ratum ashnute. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So stick with it, your time will come. You should always be preparing though, and realizing that this is a real thing. And that's why it's important to hear every day, to practice every day. And that plus your life's experiences will add up to a deep realization. A few more reflections? Yes. We need a mic in the back for Sukeshwari.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Can you
turn the yellow mic up, please?
Hare Krishna. Yeah. Prabhu, I was just thinking that, at the end of the life, as you mentioned, we will have a lot of, physically we'll be so weak and things like that. What should we do so that, I was just thinking about it this morning. I've been sick for a couple of days, and I was thinking that if you are just having a little fever or a cold or a cough, you are so drained out and you can't even chant your rounds nicely. So I was thinking that at the end of the life, when it's going to be probably 100 times what you have today, how would you keep your mind focused on Krishna? And I know it's just practice that you have to do all through your life, but what is it?
We'll take that as a kind of a warning, an indication to practice harder when you do have the opportunity. A few years ago, I had this condition on my foot called plantar fasciitis. It means one of the tendons becomes torn or inflamed or something like that. It was very painful for about 9 months, very hard for me to walk. I even had to skip my Govardhan Parikram that one year because I couldn't walk, and they told me not to. And I mean, just walking on my normal walk, I felt horrible. And so I went to see my family doctor, and she said, you're lucky. She said, take this as like you're getting old, and this is a warning sign for you. He said, a lot of people get cancer, and that's their warning sign. You just got plantar fasciitis. He said, you're lucky. You got something that is enough of a warning, but, it's not cancer. So, these are like lights on the dashboard of the car. You take them seriously. Some people keep driving, and then the transmission goes out. But we're meant to take the lessons from what we see in our life, and see, you have a realization, like, what am I going to do when I'm actually in that situation? So become more prepared, and utilize the time that you have when you can give your full energy as much as possible, because that will carry over. Yes.
Prabhu, I was thinking about this verse in the 4th canto where Dhruva Maharaj regrets for asking for benediction, which is greater than, or material prosperity that is greater than his great-grandfather, Lord Brahma. And in the purport, I remember, I think it's 4th canto, 9th chapter, I don't remember the verse, but 34, 35, 36, either of those. And then in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that asking for material prosperity, at least this is what Dhruva Maharaj felt, that his asking for material prosperity from the Lord is like asking the emperor for some broken grains of rice. And then in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the real independence of a living entity is to be engaged in the service of the Lord, or if you want to ask for any benediction, that is the benediction to ask. And if you ask for anything else, it's a real misfortune.
Yes, and it reminded me of Krishna's guidelines in the Bhagavad Gita for what he calls the regulative principles of freedom. That you're taking some restriction in your life, and you may be delaying gratification that you get here, but because you're doing it in the right way under Krishna's direction, then you become freed from the bondage that obligates you to again and again try for material happiness, even though you don't want it. Even you may come to consciousness you don't want it, but you're still forced to do it. But eventually you'll get prasadam, adhigachati, you get this mercy of the Lord. Eric Fromm, a thinker and writer, said that there's freedom to and freedom from. So people want freedom to do anything they want, or freedom to have whatever they want. But then there's a higher concept, is how to become freed from the influences that make you want to have all these things. And this is Krishna's idea in the Bhagavad Gita, freedom from the bondage to the material world. That's much more a valuable kind of freedom. And who else? Manjula Kanta is deferring.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Regarding the point that we were discussing about when we see near and dear ones passing away, we remember and then we forget. I was thinking that in Kali Yuga, nowadays, we are getting more and more of such experiences. Probably if we were in Satya Yuga, the lifespan would have been much more and we would not have heard. Now, like yesterday we were talking to our devotee friend in Seattle. His son is 24-year-old and they're taking the ventilator from his body to let him die peacefully. So all these things, we keep hearing them. Like last year I saw my friend going away. So it's not like happening so far these days. So it's happening so much more. So to keep us in check that our end might also come anytime. These experiences are happening more often. That's what I feel.
Yeah, you can prepare for that. There's no harm in getting ready. My parents were very organized, and I saw before they passed away, they winnowed out a lot of the stuff they didn't need. They designated to the kids in the family, said, "What do you want?" It's like, okay, that's yours, this yours. Even though they kept it in their house, they designated, and they took care of all their affairs financially, and made sure that everything was in order. Because they had this sense, like, hey, we're in our late 80s, anything could happen at any time. And I just observed their example. If you look at your environment now, sometimes I think like, okay, say I die now and then everyone starts going through my stuff, what are they going to see? And, what kind of order is it in? If you take the vision that, like, okay, this could be my last day, and organize your life accordingly, of course, you don't want to become psychotic and start thinking, like, in such a way that you can't function in the world. But one should have a healthy dose of a healthy view that, which is true, that I'm in a tenuous situation, I can go away at any time, and you can act upon that. Organize yourself in such a way that you're living according to that situation, and not thinking that, I'll just live forever. I'll take care of it later. You may not have the opportunity. Why not do it now? All the Shastras give this kind of, none of them say, take it easy, it doesn't really matter, you can do it later. None of them say that. They all say, hurry up. They say, start when you realize exactly what it is. You should take it fully seriously as soon as possible, and don't consider any material impediments. You should just invest yourself as far as you've realized. Take as much advantage of it as you can right now. So we have full permission to do that according to the Shastra, as much as you like. Prepare yourself. Everyone has that permission. Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I just wanted to point out in one conversation in Srila Prabhupada, someone commented, I think it was a different context about atheists, and someone commented there are no atheists in foxholes. Because there it's pretty much, you're finding like one going down, the other going down, another going down in the opposite side. It happens so frequently that death becomes very real. In the battlefield, death becomes very real. And so there are no atheists, because at that time, although he is fighting, he is always, praying to someone that save me, because that fear is there. Fear of death becomes very real in the battlefield.
Yes. Thank you very much. So, the other point from this chapter is that Hiranyakashipu moved into the heavenly planets. This is the tendency of a materialistic person, always wants to readjust and try to get a better opulence. And so he moves into the palace of Lord Indra, because he basically kicked Indra out so he could live in that situation. And the residents of the higher planets also had an expectation that their neighborhood would stay relatively peaceful and calm, and that they'd always have what they have now. But in a moment, it all changed. When Hiranyakashipu was given his benedictions, he started manipulating everybody. And only three entities, that was Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, were not under his control. Everybody else had to change their lifestyle drastically. And we can see that it's easy to take for granted whatever situation one has in this world. You may think that I'll have this situation forever. I'm not talking about like I may die at some time. I'm talking about like I have a certain amount, for instance, we're in America, we have a certain amount of freedom, or we have a stable house, and I live on a quiet street. Well, that can be turned upside down at any minute. And, Hiranyakashipu could move in your neighborhood or take over, or he could take over the city council and change all the laws, or, he could become president. Anything can happen. There have been all kinds of ways in which, governments have changed, all the lifestyle changes overnight. Sometimes countries are invaded by other countries. They're engaged in their regular daily activities, and they're invaded. So don't expect that everything will stay the same in the material world. That's unreasonable. You can learn that from this, and that's one of the things Prahlad Maharaj took away. Prabhupada writes in this purport to verse number 12, it appears that even in the higher planetary systems to which people are promoted by pious activities, disturbances are created by asuras like Hiranyakashipu. No one in the three worlds can live in peace and harmony without disturbance. And some of the greatest hits. Prabhupada therefore mentions in verse 21 in his purport that if from the very beginning we seek shelter of the Supreme Friend, there will be no cause of danger. It is said that if a dog is swimming in the water and one wants to cross the ocean by catching hold of the dog's tail, certainly he is foolish. Similarly, if in distress one seeks shelter of a demigod, he is foolish, for his efforts will be fruitless. In all circumstances, one should seek shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then there will be no danger under any circumstances. So this is the solution. I've named the problems just to put you all in anxiety, and it's a good kind of anxiety. And then the solution comes, and that is remember your Supreme Friend. And there's several manifestations. Krishna comes as the Bhagavad Gita. So take shelter of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. His instruction at the end of Gita is Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mame Kam Sharanam Braja Aham Twang Sarva Papibhyo Mokshayishami Masuja. Don't hesitate, he says, and don't worry about what else is going to happen when you do this. And then when he says what to do, surrender to me. And so this is from your friend. This is from our friend. He's our supreme friend, and he's always with us, and he knows how to take care of us. And if we take that instruction, instead of trying to take shelter of the material world or arrange my situation here so that I can have a modicum of so-called safety, if I instead invest my energy and my consciousness in taking shelter of Krishna, in his instruction in the Bhagavad Gita, to surrender to him, then I'll immediately feel relief. And if the main benediction that I'm asking for is to develop more and more taste and love for serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as we heard in the initial bhajan we sang today, that we consider my main asset, if we consider my only asset is the service to the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then the comings and goings of this world that are inevitable will not have the same effect on us that they do on a person who's fully invested in the idea that I'll live here forever and I'll be happy, I'll live happily ever after. That's H-E-A. H-E-A. It's the old H-E-A, happily ever after, that never quite computes for us here in the material world. Manjula Kanta, you remembered your point? Or it's the same point, but now with gusto you're going to present it, because before you were thinking, should I make this point?
never to refute a Guru Maharaj, but still, when you were saying, that we must find our strength to accept and surrender, I remember the other verse that says, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavam Mam Prapadyante. And it's very depressing to hear the Bahunam Janmanam Ante. And sometimes I hear that and I think, there I am, Bahunam Janmanam Ante. Maybe not this Janma. So many times, practicing Krishna consciousness, we hit so many bumpers, speed bumpers along the road, that we feel the steps that we are expected to climb are more steeper than we can manage to face. So sometimes, even though the heart desires something, the mind and the situation in which we are gives us so much asat trishna that the only thing we can do is sometimes remember to ask Krishna, how can I do? How can I do? For most of the time, we are very busy living the life we are. So in the process of living that life, many moments we hear the Shastra, we hear Guru. Like for instance, driving down the road, seeing the houses, you think, oh, it would be good to settle down, have a house of your own and just finally stop roaming. And then you hear the verse, Brahmande Brahmite, you have been roaming many lifetimes. So this lifetime too you shall roam unless you find your Guru's feet and surrender. But that surrender is such a simple word, and it is so, so difficult to surrender. We think of the Lord when we are in pain, when we are in need. But on a general basis, to remember the Lord, as you tell us hundreds of thousands of times, to just stay connected in Shastra and do your sadhana becomes a mountain rather than just a bump. Where's hope?
Well, you're here now, right? I mean, you're here in the temple room, and in spite of everything, one who continues with Krishna consciousness. This is the idea behind Tate Anukampam Susumikshamano, Punjani Vatma Kritam Vipakam, that this is the material world is a mixed up place, and you can't trace out how you've come to be here, or even all the reactions and things like that, but you can discern that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that you'll feel satisfied by serving Him. And then you do the best that you can with what you have in every situation in life and at every moment of the day. Try to win the small battles. In fact, if you make it a point to get at least 3 little victories every day. This is a game I play sometimes when I feel that there's the time factor and the mind is so oppressive that I say, okay, my game today is to get 3 victories. Victories over the senses, over any kind of fear that I have of performing my duty. It's like, I'll put it off because, I don't want to do that. That's too difficult. And if you can get the smallest of victories, even you add up 3 in a day, this is what I call staying alive in Krishna consciousness. Because somehow or other, if you can string together one day after another, 3 victories a day, and then 3 days in a row, and get 3 months in a row, even if it looks like you're, to you that it's an insignificant thing that you're doing, that's a lifetime of success. And the Shastra tells us that we should do what we can with what we have now, and develop that desire and vision that I'm here for a higher purpose. And Krishna will give us the strength. Even as we're leaving this world, we see devotees who have had some involvement in devotional service and then have gone away for a long time, and then it gets time to leave the world. Of course, this isn't a recommended way to do it, but still, even with that, the devotees have so much strength because they've invested in Krishna consciousness. What to speak of somebody who sticks it out throughout a lifetime, despite the speed bumps and the consideration that it's like a mountain to climb. It's not so easy. Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I was just thinking that was very striking that Prabhupada said that there are disturbances in all the three worlds. Like even in heaven, it is not, your position is not assured. And to that end, my sister Priya Gopika in India, she lost her job a year ago. She just got a job like 2-3 days ago. And it has been like a ride for her, and including me, because I'm so attached to her. So her pain becomes kind of mine. I have been praying for her like every day. And so during that time, she had heard one of your lectures, and she had heard that the remedy for anxiety in this material world is shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam. And for some reason that stuck with her so well. She spent the whole year reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Like we were reading it together, and I was with her on 4th canto, she's on 9th. And so she read like 3-4 cantos in that time. And she took complete surrender of Srimad Bhagavatam, and she kept me motivated. Like I was thinking I was helping her by giving her advice, like, these are passing phases in life, and, it's like disturbances are like clouds, they come and go. Sometimes it's rainy cloud, sometimes it's white cloud. So I was giving her those motivational things, but actually she was keeping me motivated because she'll share her realizations, like, oh, in this canto I read it, and I don't want to reveal this to you because this is the best part. You have to come to it and, read it for yourself. So I'm jumping up to keep up now, like there's more coming. So, and also another thing, that in that time, I guess she told me many times that her chanting at that time was the best that she's ever had. And she truly understood the meaning of surrender to holy name. And I was like, when she said that to me, I was like, oh wow, so maybe sometimes what you need is to fall face flat on ground to really surrender and understand what that surrender is. So I'm glad that came for her. It was a very, very turbulent time, so just my realization.
Yeah, thank you. These are very practical points and realization. And just about surrender. I mean, there's surrender, you can go through your life and apply the process, and then gradually Krishna will help you divest yourself. Or then some people do it preemptively. And you decide, okay, this is all going to be wrenched away by material nature one way or another. So I volunteer to surrender first. Cheat death before death cheats you. And just say, okay, sorry, I beat you to it, I already surrendered, it's too late. So you can be preemptive in that way also. And certainly in the Bhagavatam, it's advising us to do that in every page. Yes?
I apologize. I just wanted to add another thing is that during our conversation, we talked about one really good thing to Manjula Kanta Mataji's point, is that mercy is almost everywhere, especially if you have chosen this path. Like you just have to reach out and tap to it, because we all hit our lows. And like for her, the mercy was listening to that lecture and clinging to that when you're in anxieties, read Srimad Bhagavatam. That became her sailing boat. And there are times when I go through hard time and I have heard your lecture, and two things that keep me going, and sometimes I wonder, like, what kind of a devotee I am, and am I progressing in the way that I'll make it in this lifetime? What will happen to me, right? So I think of two things at different lectures I had heard, and they became like my clinging point is, you had said that celebrate small victories. Don't worry about the big stuff, like small little victories. Like when I finish one canto, I share with Shraddha Madha, I finished a canto. Like that's a victory for me. Even if I'm going at a snail pace, there are Bhakti Vaibhav exalted devotees that have read maybe 2-3 times. I may not be able to do it in this lifetime, but I'm doing what I am. And then you said that Krishna watches even a paper thin effort of yours. That I just cling to that like anything. It's like, Krishna is watching and I'm doing what I can. So that gives me a lot of relief. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice points. Okay, Shraddha, the last one coming from the internet. And then we have a very special program in just a couple of minutes. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that what she does is not paper thin, by the way. So this is a message from Sundarananda Prabhu. And he's saying...
Our Sundarananda?
Yes.
Wow. I was wondering why I wasn't getting the usual Ananda.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the insightful class. I like the point about how the more we possess in this world, it's a liability. It is best to do what is minimally required to be in this world.
Yeah, or if Krishna gives you a lot of stuff, then to use it in his service is the same. It's yukta vairagya. So it's not that we just reject everything out of hand, but it's more the mentality that everything is meant for Krishna's service. Prabhupada's motto was, everything for Krishna, nothing for me. All for Krishna, nothing for me. And there's a complete freedom and bliss in giving oneself to Krishna in that way.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.